Hello, wonderful viewers. Thanks for clicking on this art session video. So, I recently recorded my entire process of, well, not the entire process, but most of the process for this background for my upcoming game, Bellhop. It's essentially, I needed more backgrounds for the different screens that you get to interact with. So you'll be going to the level select screen, you'll be going to the options menu, the credits screen has to have a little bit of a background. So right now the only background I have is the main menu background, which is also the key art for the game. And I thought, yeah, I can't just put that everywhere, so I want to have at least one more background. We own a cat, a white cat. She's very cute, very fluffy. Her name is Cosmo. And I thought, hey, what a great way to pay homage to our beautiful, beautiful cat than to have her in one of the backgrounds. So you'll see that I actually started trying to create that sense of fluffiness in the art style that the rest of the game is drawn in. And spoiler, it doesn't stick, it doesn't look good. But I wanted to leave it in specifically because I wanted to show it's okay to make mistakes. It doesn't have to be perfect. And that's maybe a reminder to myself more than anything else. Because I tend to be a perfectionist. I tend to get down on myself if I don't do it right in the first go. But that's okay. It's okay to try things and they don't work out, and maybe you have to resort to something simpler. It's okay. Anyway, that's one thing that I wanted to showcase. Second, I mean, the entirety of this process, I've recorded everything, including some of the breaks or like interruptions I had. So I cut those out from this video, but in total, just the time spent drawing things is just a little over 6 hours, which surprised me. It seems a bit long, but then you think about all the different things I've done. I mean, a good chunk of it is spent trying out this fluffy look, and once I realize it's not really working, I resort to a simpler shading style, and then I go on to fill in the screen with other bits of doodads, as you would call them. And I guess I was just enjoying my time with it. And that's something that I think is a bit lost, I guess, in some media. Like, there's pleasure to be had from just drawing something, even if it is for a particular purpose. It's not just the joy of, oh, I'm creating a piece of art. I'm creating this piece of art for the purpose of having something to look at while you're creating your profile or whatever, but it's still enjoyable. And I wanted to leave it in here. I wanted to keep it up on my YouTube channel to remind me of the fun I had drawing it. On top of that, I guess other ramblings that I'm thinking of talking about is just the process of working on the game. I'm very near to completion. I'll be posting another devlog soon just to show everything I have. And the whole state of making games and what you expect from players and everything, and how my mindset has changed. So let's start with that, actually. I used to fear a lot with I used to fear not making enough money or a profit, or even just cutting even with games. Somewhat related is the reason why I stopped working on Volatile. That's essentially it. I just felt like the amount of time I spent working on that game, especially because it's essentially my first game. I was learning a lot, and there's a lot of things in the code there that are just, you don't want to know what's going on. But I realized that I spent so much time on the art, on the coding, on the sounds, on the music, that it's almost an impossible ask that it actually makes a decent amount of money. And that scared me. That used to scare me because that was, in my head, a barometer of success. I've since changed my mind on how I view that, especially now with Bellhop. So the timeline is this. I've been working on Volatile for years and years, 4 years I think, by the time I started working on Up and Away. Up and Away was a break project, which it was just a simple idea of, hey, you only use one button to play through the entire game. I saw game jams that had that as a theme, and I thought, hey, that's a pretty good challenge to put on yourself. I want to see what I can do with it. It grew into like a bit more of a game than just a test. So I started kind of focusing a lot more on that because I was rediscovering the joy of making something from scratch. In Volatile, I had gotten to a point where all that was left was, one, the tedious task of just putting enemies in and like fine-tuning things, and the tedious task of writing quests, because like I said, I started from the beginning. I started learning coding with Volatile. My dialogue system is pretty janky in terms of code. It works just fine on screen, but the if-else conditions that I've been putting in there are very, very weirdly put together. I'll give you an example. If I want to have a side quest that shows up at all times as an option in the dialogue choices, I have to manually code that option in every time the main objective changes with relation to the character that's supposed to give you the main quest and the side quest. And that's because, in this example, the secondary character has some input and some things to say that is supposed to say, okay, hey, I know what you're doing right now. Even though I'm not directly involved in your main quest, I can give you a little bit of information. So, you get the main quest from the main captain there, and they'll tell you, oh, hey, do this, go do that. So the secondary character will say, oh, good luck out there. If you're going to do this particular task, you should be aware that this is a dangerous area, whatever. And then the main quest changes, and they'll have a different quip for the next main quest. Because of the way I coded it, every time the main quest changes, I have to make sure that I code in below that quip that the secondary character says. I have to make sure I code in that they are also giving you the choice of a secondary quest to start it. And if I do that, I also have to keep track of where in the process you are. So for example, you start the quest during you start the secondary mission during main mission number 2, but then you finish something in main mission number 2, it now changes to number 3. So when you come back to this NPC, I have to manually code in that they have to keep track of of secondary mission number 1, while main mission number 3 is also acting, and I have to do that for every single main mission. Anyway, long story short, so that's the problem that I was having there. It was getting tedious to to keep track of all these things just because of the way I wrote the quest system, and it seemed like an even more impossible task to rewrite the whole thing because I had so much dialogue done and so many things done. And you know, it's spanning across 7-8 different NPCs, and that may not seem like a lot if you're not really dealing with these sorts of things, but it adds up when you're trying to take into consideration what the player's doing. I took inspiration from The Witcher 3 in terms of like making you feel like you're being heard, if that makes sense. So yeah. So that was getting very tedious. So I moved on to Up and Away, which I was feeling happy that it was simpler. You know, I had the base game done, so I was understanding everything that was going in, and I was like bug fixing all of it myself. I was checking for all sorts of things. I was feeling very confident in the product as a full finished game, and that's what was missing at the time from Volatile. Volatile felt like an achievable project, but because I'm working on these projects in my spare hours after, you know, my day job, it felt like the biggest chore. So I moved on to Up and Away as a full-time project. I felt, okay, I'm gonna finish Up and Away and then I'll continue on Volatile because it'll feel like a refreshing change of pace for a while. It'll reinvigorate me for Volatile, etc. So I'm terrible with marketing. Even this art session is part of my attempt to bring a bit of marketing to Bellhop. But I'm terrible with it. And so Up and Away released. I'm not going to sit here and say it deserves necessarily more attention, but I will lie if I would say it's gotten the attention I thought it would. Even with my low estimates, I thought, okay, it would make $200. You know, it would bring back the fee I spent for Steam to cover it. So I felt dejected and I felt kind of upset for a while. Undeservedly, now that I look at it in retrospect, and deservedly specifically to me. This is not to say if you're in this situation you shouldn't feel dejected or anything. It's a normal human emotion. It's almost impossible not to have that, right? And I'm sure that's going to happen to me in particular multiple times going forward. But I picked myself up and I said, okay, now that I've gotten a bit more of an understanding of what I'm doing with Game Maker Studio 2, because that's what I've been coding my games in, I want to try another small game. This Up and Away was easy. It took, 3 months from beginning to end, all assets included, art, sound design, music. Let's try another one, and I'll release another small game for another small fee. And that was Bellhop. And in my head, that was a small enough project. It turned out to be a bit bigger. I've been working for almost a year now. I would say I started in earnest in March, so maybe just half a year, just over half a year. And it's almost ready. Everything's feature complete, so to speak. Now I'm just bug fixing and just including a few more visual things in the game. So I've been doing that since March, and a lot of other things have been happening in my life. And I've reached the conclusion that I'm done trying to make money off of these games. Don't get me wrong, they're still not free. But I think what's been missing from a lot of the offerings that are happening from big companies is the pleasure of making something. And you may or may not agree or even understand what I'm trying to say with that, but there's a certain understanding you can get as a player that love and passion was put into the project you're playing. Or you may feel that it's missing. And I kind of hate talking about specific games, so I'm not going to, unless they're mine. But that's, I think, what I've realized I want to focus on. Up and Away was a passion project. Bellhop is a passion project, and I think that's all I'm going to want out of these games. I'm going to price them according to what I think is fair compared to the amount of time and resources I put into making the game. So, I'll give you an example. For Bellhop, I'm probably going to charge $8.99 US for the game. It's got 16 levels, and I'm going to maybe add a few extra levels post-release. I'll see. But I want the project to be mainly a showcase of the passion I put into it, you know? Because there's just something about creating something from scratch. For me, anyway. There's something about knowing that you've put something out there for people to play, to enjoy, to experience. And so I will be maybe not focusing so much on the marketing part of it. Maybe not focus so much on the, oh, I gotta appeal to this player base, or oh, I gotta do this or that. That's not to say that if somebody notices that there's a potential quality of life thing that could be added to the game or whatever to make it more enjoyable. That's not to say I'm not gonna fix it or adjust to it, but I'm not gonna try to appeal to a certain demographic or whatever. I'm gonna make the games that I like working on, and that'll be enough to satisfy me for now, Not saying that this is necessarily the case, but if I never really make enough to sustain me off of just these games, so be it. I'll still work on video games even then, because I just enjoy the process. I've got a lot of crazy ideas for games. Maybe crazy is the wrong word, but ambitious. Ambitious can translate to crazy depending on your own resources, right? I'm a solo dev for now, so yeah, ambitious definitely translates to crazy in this scenario. I've got ideas for games in 3D. I've been learning a lot from other creators like Dragonite Spam on YouTube with regards to 3D in Game Maker Studio 2. I want to make a game in Game Maker Studio 2 that's fully 3D. But I'm learning about those things now, but that's not even the next 2 or 3 projects. It's not going to happen so soon. I'm going to make other smaller 2D games, almost for sure, coming up. I've got ideas. I may make videos about the ideas. I'm going to finish Volatile. I want to add everything I meant to add to begin with. It's got 12 main missions planned. It's gonna be a total of 10-hour-ish game if you're playing leisurely and you wanna, take your time and do things, but not like scour every single corner. I want to do a few more 2D projects. There's one in particular that I think would be an amazing game that I may even consider a Kickstarter for. I'll see. I want to have a prototype out before I decide on that. But all that is to say that I will not quit making games. And I think what I would love out of all of this is if I contribute even just a little bit to reducing the amount of games that require microtransactions, DLCs, all those things. I would love to contribute to stopping that practice. I have been a very big fan of what companies like CD Projekt Red have been doing with regards to the idea of an expansion versus DLC. I cherish the days where you would see expansions announced for something like StarCraft, Diablo 2. Oh, I remember the day where I heard, the Frozen Throne was coming out for Warcraft 3, and I was so giddy. Because Warcraft 3, I think, is one of the best RTS experiences I've ever had. Even though it's not my favorite RTS, I think it does the best job of immersing you in its campaign. And keep in mind, I'm talking specifically as a single-player story enjoyer. It's odd to love real-time strategy with base building as for their story. I know almost nobody does that anymore. Nobody really cares, but I do. I wish we had more of those. It's one of the games that I'm thinking of. It's not a standard campaign RTS that I want to make, but I think that's like 10 projects down the line, because I want to have the experience under my belt to do that. Now I'm going off tangents, but so those games did that back in the day, and then CD Projekt Red was doing that with The Witcher 3, and I love that idea. If you're not putting out the amount of content that feels fair for the asking price, I don't think you should put it out there. I'm only speaking for myself. I don't like feeling like I got an incomplete version of a game until I've purchased all of the DLCs for cosmetics. And this is specifically for single player games. Like I don't like feeling like I'm playing a story focused game, but if you want to look particularly cool, or if you want to have more experience, or if you don't want to grind in a single player game, you pay an additional $10 or whatever. I think that's too greedy. It's too obnoxious. And I'm not pointing any fingers. I understand that most companies have a board of directors because they're publicly traded, and they have to answer to these board of directors, and they're constantly needing to make profit. I understand the logistics of it. I'm not blaming the developers in these cases, because I don't know of any situation where they really have a choice in the matter. Not really. But I don't want to be part of that. I don't want to have a publicly traded company. I want to be privately owned and do the things that I think are fair to consumers. That's why Up and Away is $2.99 US. I think that's a fair price. That's why Bellhop is going to be $8.99 US. I think for the amount of work and the amount of enjoyment you get out of it, because that also comes into play. It's not just about the amount of work I put in, but the amount of enjoyment I think a player can get from them. I think $8.99 is a good price. So, yeah, I think with regards to the two things that I really wanted to put out in this video is my change in mindset with regards to developing these games, and the goal I have as a creator. And who knows, maybe one day I'll be able to start hiring freelancers to help me with these projects. I would love that. I would love a team that's tightly knit and passionate about the things we do. That's another thing I kind of think is missing from the AAA space, and I'm not gonna say I'm a AAA developer anytime soon, maybe never. But it's something that I kind of miss seeing in interviews about the big games. You would see team members from Westwood Studios talking about how passionate they were about implementing this or that feature. There was no real fear of saying the wrong things in interviews or whatever. Now that you don't see that. If it's an indie team, that makes sense, but if it's a bigger team from a bigger studio, that's gone. Even things like, Microsoft now owns a bajillion studios. You can't find that type of interview or that type of passion in full display from any of their teams, no matter how small. And that's because I understand there's embargoes and all that. I wish I saw a lot more of that. A lot more of that tight-knit team of 10 people just making a game that they're super passionate about without any interference or anything like that from the company above. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to make. And I'm going to stay independently owned for as long as possible. Well, as far as I'm concerned, unless I can no longer work on these games and there's a big tragedy in my life that I really need to take care of and I have to give up being a developer. That's the only instance where I think I would ever let go of the projects that I have. But aside from that, no, these things are staying as they are. When I make DLCs, and I mean paid DLCs, they're gonna be full-on expansions to the games I make, not just an additional 2 levels or whatever. I even have plans for additional levels on Up and Away. It's not really cost effective for me to try to make more for that game because it's just not bringing in any revenue, but I will eventually make them, and they're gonna be free. I'm not charging for additional 10 levels or whatever. It's already got 40 levels. They're getting kind of samey. The additional 10 will just, make things a little bit different for the 10 levels. It'll be a different twist, but it's going to stay free as the update. Up and Away itself is paid, but the update is going to be free. And that's the kind of stuff I love to see, and that's the kind of stuff I want to do. Labor of love kind of updates. Now, I think I've talked quite enough. I hope you've been enjoying the art that I made. The flowers, there was a lot more love in making the flowers than I thought there'd be. I don't often draw flowers or anything like that, but had a lot of fun making these, had a lot of fun working on the composition of it all. My wife gave me the idea of the ledger on the table that helps kind of tie all this back together. So yeah, it's been fun. I hope you've enjoyed a little look into my art making process. For whoever's listening, if you want to see more of this type of stuff, maybe not necessarily my ramblings here, but maybe more of the art stuff, just make a mention, maybe like the video. You don't have to, but if you do, I'll know that this is more of this stuff you guys want to see. Thanks everyone. If you like Bellhop or what I've shown before of Bellhop, feel free to wishlist it on Steam. You'll get a notification when it's out. I don't have an announced release date yet, but should be soon. I'm hoping by the end of the year it's out and everybody can enjoy it. I will release a demo soon though, so I'll make a video about that. Thanks everyone, and I hope you enjoy your days, your weeks, your months. Until next time.